Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Liege in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 41, The Chains of the Labyrinth 3. Earlier. Just as the spell activated and everything was bathed in a bright light, a flash of purple light engulfed her body, indicating that Shay's shadow slide is activating and will take her to a safe place and away from the spell. Byleth. Suthies. Shouted. I got it, she said as she created a single clone of her before Shadow Slide took her away and take her someplace safe just as the chains grabs her clone. I never thought that touch on my shoulder is all he needed to transfer enough power to me in order for me to last a battle after I released so much of Suthies and to Shadow Slide me to a safe place where I can hide and rest for a bit, all the while my clone is distracting Anaximandros and Bias, while I can see everything and convey what I was thinking, she thought. Thanks for always looking out for me, Shay, she thought lovingly. Despite what I initially thought of him, the twerp is quite a quick thinker, but I guess it's only because of you and him not being by your side during the duration of this fight, Suthies said. Isn't he amazing, she swooned. You can swoon or adore him all you like later, but right now, focus on the enemy, Suthies said. Right, she said with a nod. I see that you came back to be killed off by us, huh? Bias said with a smirk, that eager to burned alive by your own great-grandmother. She asked, then, we will grant your wish and let you burn while knowing you are alone with no one to remember you by, Bias mocked. Not really in the mood to be burned to crisp just like Anaximandros over there, she said with a shrug of her shoulder. And who says that I'm alone? She asked. Who would willingly be with someone like you, Archbishop? Bias asked a woman who is neither a beast or a human. Someone who is supposed to die on the day they are born. Someone who is born to kill anything and anyone. Isn't your mother proof of that? Bias stated. Okay, that stung a bit. She knows that she is the reason why her mother died, but isn't that more proof of her mother's love towards her? The fact that she willingly gave up her heart for her is all the proof she needed in order to know her mother loved her to the very end, and no amount of taunts from Bias' vile and villainous mouth can convince her otherwise. Well, you seem to misunderstood the meaning behind her sacrifice, but I guess someone that have such a twisted view in love couldn't possibly understand the pure love of a mother towards her child, and, she said before smiling, I wasn't alone, she said. Are talking about the unfeeling goddess that is residing inside you? Bias asked, looking at the pendant hanging on around her neck. Forget it, she said with a sneer. A goddess like her would just chew you up and spat you back up the moment she is done using you, she said, and the same can be said towards whoever this person is. Bias said. You're wrong, she exclaimed. I'm not alone and I'm not a tool, she stated. We are bonded together, but we don't cling to one another. Our bond is strong enough for us to put our lives within each other's hands and trust each other to care and to protect one another, she said. I'm the Archbishop of Fodlan. I'm she who swore to protect the peace of Fodlan and to protect King Dimitri's reign and to ensure that it will be so for all of his descendants, she said. I'm the vessel of the progenitor god of Fodlan, and I have sworn to protect Fodlan and everyone who have called it their home, she said. Suthies chuckled before it turned into a full-on laugh that is a mixture of happiness and pride. Hearing Suthies laugh like that made her smile. Anaximandros, Bias called out in panic. Burn, Fellstar, Anaximandros said as he tried to summon the flames from Sword of the Creator, only for it to have no reaction. The flaming sword, she said as she closed her eyes as Suthies' powers surge inside her. Do you mean this? She asked as flames burst out from her hands in a shape of a sword or some other weapon. Just what in the world is happening? Bias exclaimed. And how in the world does that heretic knows about the secret of the labyrinth? She thought. Move, Anaximandros said urgently, as he pushed Bias out of the way just in time to block her attack. She slowly smiled as the flames stared to dissipate, revealing the weapon she have in hand. When did she get away from her, Anaximandros? Bias shouted as she saw runes and patterns appeared on the blade, indicating that she is activating its power. Wadesh, Anaximandros said, and that is the only word he is able to mutter before she unleashed the lance's power tenfold. Anaximandros froze as he felt his own medicine. What it is about cutting my hands again, Anaximandros? She asked as she proceeded to cut Anaximandros' hands, effectively making him let go of the sword of the Creator. Bias watched in horror as Anaximandros slowly got on his knees as he bleeds out. Here, she said as she catched the sword of the Creator in one hand while aiming Gibald towards Bias on the other. I'll give it back to you. She said as she threw the lance towards Bias, hitting the woman squarely on the chest before she charges towards the two and swung the sword of the Creator, cutting the two in half before the wings appeared and she took off to the sky. The hosts are destroyed by the mourner of Atlanta and the other Agar then at the foot of the mountain started moving, which meant that Shay finally have a grasp of the spell and is on the process of destroying them in order to reveal the final piece of the puzzle. And if my senses are then, the place where he heading right now is where the tool is. She thought he truly have been fighting alongside me all this time. This is what being together meant. It wasn't just the physical manifestation of one's love, but it is also the trust between two people, just like me and him, she thought as she felt Suthi's powers intensifying at the sudden burst of happiness inside her heart. Valerie jumped from roof to roof as fast as she can towards the coordinates of Raphael and Ignatz have given her. You'll see a modest-looking manor, turn right there and the woman in a pink dress is your target, Ignatz said. Woman in a pink dress, Valerie said. Gotcha. She said as she went to the direction and saw her target before she chanted a spell and cast it upon the woman, effectively destroying the spell that was encoded inside the woman. Next, Valerie said. Right, Raphael said. The next one is the guy in red tunic, you will find him in the market. He said. Got it, Valerie said as she turned around to head towards the direction of the maquette. She saw the man as soon as she entered the area. Dispel. She said as she hit the man with the spell, effectively destroying the coding of the spell inside the man. 2 more to go. Dash. She said as she felt a very dangerous and oppressive. The next one is Dash, Ignatz said. That's not necessary, Valerie said as she felt the oppressive aura coming. We are done here, she said. What? Raphael said, but there is still 2 more to go. He said. We are running out of time, Valerie said. Big sis, Ignatz said. Ms. Valerie, Raphael said. Shut up, Valerie said. I've done my job and that is to buy some time for the Archbishop. We are done here, she stated. It's impossible for me to escape that man for the second time, Valerie said. This isn't like you at all, Ms. Valerie. What happened to the cool and strong Ms. Valerie we met? Raphael said. She gritted her teeth in frustration and at the feeling of the weights of their expectations. Don't put such a high expectations from me. She thought it isn't a matter of whether or not I'm being myself. I just don't have any idea of what I'm doing with my life right now, Valerie said. Then, how about your mission to honor your friends and family? Ignatz asked. Even that one lost its purpose since I know that it won't bring the dead to life or happiness, Valerie said. Then, how about you protect this place? Raphael asked. Protect? Valerie asked as the weight keeps getting heavier towards her. How do you expect me to protect this place if I don't even have such a strong sense of responsibility to do so like the Archbishop does? She asked. All I'm is a broken woman who have nothing to live for now. Not revenge, not even hatred. I'm just nothing. Valerie screamed in frustration before she felt the presence nearing her location. No talking during a fight, you two, she said as the oppressive presence is almost upon her. Talk to you two later, Valerie said as she cut their communication just as something landed heavily on the ground, sending shockwave throughout the area and destroying the surrounding infrastructure. Now, what to do? Valerie muttered as the dust started to dissipate as a looming figure stood there and ready. Well, no other way than to fight, she muttered. Looks like we will have a good fight till the very end this time, Heracles growled in delight. Let us enjoy this as two beasts, he said as the dust revealed his monstrous form, a body of a man, with a lion's head, horns of a bull atop his head and a feet of a bird with the wings of a bat. The mouth of the lion opened themselves wide, revealing rows upon rows of teeth, a man's head, beautiful slaughterer. Heracles said in delight. Valerie chuckled at that. I do find older men alluring, but, she said, I find myself thinking that a sea cucumber is more attractive than you, Valerie said. Oh, he muttered as he felt the presence on the chapel at the foot of the eastern side of Okama Mountain disappear. The metamorphic slaughterer already left, he muttered as he continued running. I guess that's my cue to make my move, he said. The chapel at the eastern side of the Okama Mountain? Valerie asked. Yes, he said with a nod. Any particular reason why you think that location is where the tool is? Arvel asked. Well, I noticed that when the metamorphic slaughterer's presence insists on staying put onto that location despite the fact that the monastery is left unguarded and he can swoop in and take the hero's relic here and now, but no, he stayed there, he said. So, I reckon that this is where the tool is, he said. So, that old bastard is the guard dog of the tool, Valerie said. Yes, he said, and I thought that as soon as you started destroying the hosts of their spell, the two Agarthans that is currently fighting her grace is going to order him to get rid of you instead, he said. When that happened, I will sneak in and destroy the tool myself, he said. Valerie grinned. So, you are planning to use me as bait? She asked. No, I just thought that instead of fighting him together then, one of us can distract him while the other can destroy the tool, he said, and I thought you are strong enough to keep him busy for a while, he said. I say that you are more than appropriate, little Helen, Arvel said. And why is that? Valerie asked. No one is more eager than you to get away from this fight, Arvel stated. Valerie chuckled. Damn. Right, she said, but you are 3,000 years too early to take advantage of me, runt, she said. He sat there nervously. But since you did a good job finding those hosts, consider my cooperation a reward for a job well done, Valerie said. Miss Valerie, he said in relief. And it's high time to teach them a thing or two, Valerie said. They are still 2 millennia too early to think they can beat me, she said. He smiled as he made the coast as clear and looked at the beautiful landscape of the chapel. To work, he muttered. Chapter 42, The End of the Right Eye. Valerie barely managed to parry the clawed hand with her halberd before shoving to the side and delivering her own attack, which Heracles managed to catch with his hand. Is that the best you can do? Heracles asked as he formed a flaming miasma spell on his other hand and moved it towards her stomach. Valerie immediately formed the same spell in her hand and met his halfway. The two spell clashed and an explosion can be seen from the distance. Heracles barely recovered when a dark spike shot out from the veil of the dust. The attempt made him chuckle. That's the best you got, Heracles said as he caught all the spikes and crushed it with his enormous hand. How disappointing. Heracles said, let me show you what a real spell looks like, he said as he opened his mouth to chant, and 4 giant arrows made of thunder appeared above Valerie, circling her and at the ready to strike her. That's how it is done, Heracles said as the arrows shot down on her. Valerie let out a barrier to parry the attack before she intercepted it and shot it right back towards Heracles. Naive, Heracles said as he swept the spell with his hand. Where is your usual flair, huh? He asked before he shot a fireball from his mouth. The fireball came barreling towards Valerie, which she dodged easily, hitting the nearby houses instead of just destroying one house. That single fireball destroyed the whole area, leaving only a huge crater in its place before she aimed her halberd towards Heracles. Take this, you old bastard, Valerie said as she threw a magic-infused halberd towards Heracles. Are you insulting me? Heracles asked as he caught the halberd. This magic barely scratched me, let alone wound me, Heracles said as he aimed the halberd towards Valerie. Here, Heracles said as he started infusing his own magic on the halberd. This is how you do it, Heracles said as he threw it towards Valerie, in which she dodged and the halberd hit the ground, effectively swallowing half the town in flames. Too many destruction, Valerie muttered. Since when did you care about destruction, beautiful slaughterer? Heracles asked as he appeared in front of her before grabbing her with his hands. You are starting to bore me, Heracles said as Valerie started to struggle from his grasp. What happened to the usual bloodthirsty mourner of Atlanta? He asked as he got too close up her face, purple eyes still glinting in bloodlust, lacking in concentration, lacking in bloodlust. You are acting like a vulnerable woman, Heracles said as his face morphed back to his usual face. I can see that this is only a result of your recklessness and nothing more, but, he said, that in itself is a fatal error on your part. Heracles said, it's always said to say goodbye. He said, so, let me give you a final hug, Heracles said as he readied himself to throw Valerie with my hands. He said as he threw his arms forward before it separated from him, making the arms that have Valerie still in their grasp come barreling towards a chapel, hitting the building directly with the force of comet that comes barreling down on earth. Heracles opened his mouth just as his chest opened another mouth and a fiery inferno sprout forth on their mouths before a stream of fire came gushing out towards where Valerie is, burning everything and everyone on sight. Heracles waits for any signs of the young woman, but to his disappointment, no one rise from the ashes. I'll wish you a good trip to hell, he said as he turned his back from the rubbles of the town. Valerie Helena Regnus, Heracles said as he flew away. A shockwave throws him off his feet as soon as he attempts to touch the compass on the top of chapel. Of course, he muttered. Who told you that it will be that easy, Shay? He muttered. It's a strong spell, Arvel said. Ancient and unknown, but nothing the archbishop can't handle, Arvel said. Yeah, he said, but there is one problem, he said. And that is? Arvel asked. We don't have time to waste in breaking this stupid spell, he said as he attempted to touch it again only for it to repel him. Damn it, he cursed. If only I know one of these spell, then maybe I can be of more use to her, he muttered bitterly. Her brute strength can destroy the barrier and the compass, Arvel said. So, we'll wait for her, huh? He said. Being always by Byleth's side makes me forget that there is a limit on what I can do, he thought before shaking his head. Then, we'll find a way to break in fast dash, he said before he abruptly stopped. He already beat her, that easily, he thought as he started to feel an oppressive aura started to approach his location, which meant, he thought as a tall and burly man landed in front of him. The metamorphic slaughterer is here, he thought. The man looked at him for a while, calculating him. What should I do? He thought as the man looks at him with those cold and calculating purple eyes of his. He can feel his heart running 1,000 miles as fear started to envelop his whole being. For all the years he have been a mercenary, he have faced countless foes and adversaries that would have made him numb to anything but this. This is different from all the Agarthans he have encountered so far. This one is horrifying. Byleth, he thought before he comes to his senses and managed to get a hold of himself right. He thought, this is no time for me to be scared, not when Byleth is depending on me. He thought, I have to buy Byleth some time, I need time before she inevitably arrived here. He thought before he meet intimidating purple eyes again and fear started to envelope him again. Keep your head cool and calm down, he thought as he managed to stop his hands from shaking. If he can defeat Miss Valerie that easily, then this guy is out of my league, he thought as the man started to walk towards him, purple eyes watching him curiously. Then, maybe I can stall him by talking? No, it won't work, not to someone like him, it won't change a thing, he thought. Change, wait, that's it, he thought as an idea hit him. I need to create a stalemate, he thought. A bluff, he thought. He doesn't know anything about me aside from the fact that I seems like any Agarthan to him, or that this spell doesn't affect me, he thought. I need to create an illusion that I'm someone who he should be vigilant about, but who? He thought as the man keeps getting closer to him. Think, he thought as he thought of someone with dark teal hair and indigo eyes, the same color as his beloved mistress, but the eyes he remembered as cold and unfeeling in contrast of the ones who have always gazed at him as though he is the whole world. For the owner of those eyes, right, her, nobody knows who she is or her gender is unless they have come face to face with her or not too disoriented to forget about her. The stories about her clearly become an exaggeration as times goes by. I can make him believe that bluff, he thought in contempt as the man stopped just a few meters away from him. Ask who I'm, he thought. Come on, ask who I'm. He thought desperately. Who are you? Ask. The deep voice as he let out a terrifying amount of power. Yes. He thought before he took a deep breath and imitate her battle stance. He said as he glared at the man, the Ashen Demon. He announced. The man was taken aback in shock before he grinned in delight and his hands morphed into a bunch of chimera heads and fired several fireballs towards him. Just as I thought, the man said with a chuckle. The rumors are right, no spell can touch you, demon, he said. The dust dissipated, revealing that he wasn't unharmed or even scratched. He thought, I thought I was going to die. He screamed internally, thank Suthies for the Ring of Andovri. He thought, all right, the stalemate I wanted and that's for me for now, until I think of something, he thought as he stayed his ground and stared at man before him. Eventually, I have to relay on Byleth again and here I thought that I can at least have her praise me for a job well done, such a pathetic man he thought. The sword of the Creator was once again bathed in pure white flames as she raised it overhead as she hovered over the mangled and bloodied remains of her two enemies. It's over. She declared as she let out a stream of flames. Bias can only looked at Anaximandro's lifeless remains as she bleeds out. Anna, 11, she thought as she activated her spell and started gathering the remaining ration she left around the Okama mountain. As the flames is about to hit them, a flash of bright light caught her eyes before it comes to them from different directions, effectively depleting their ration supply. The power is assembling. She thought as she back away as quickly as possible before she watched the power slowly disappeared while trying to assess the situation and planning her next course of action. The light dissipated revealing Anaximandros, in crisp state and unharmed. That light is a cluster of their power, she muttered. It seems like they already gathered all of the powers all over the Okama mountain and the traps they've set was rendered useless. Be very careful, a trapped animal will always be more aggressive in more dire situations, Suthies said. Anaximandro's bright blue eyes landed on her and he snarled. Let me have you, you whore. He said. You still haven't given up on me? She asked incredulously. She have already killed Anaximandros more than once and he is still attempting to have her underneath him. Usually, she would praise such tenacity but at this state, the only thing she can feel is disgust towards the man. I suggest that you should just lay down and spread your legs for him, Bias said. That's the only way for you to shake him off your tail, your grace, she stated. She said as she saw the giant cloak like that is enveloping Anaximandros protectively. What is she? She muttered in confusion. Don't tell me, Suthies said. Yes, Bias said, just as you thought, I'm the one who is protecting Anaximandros, the very cloak that is protecting him from all harm, she said. In order to heal Anaximandros, I have to use myself or what is remaining of my life to be able to save him. By gathering the untampered sources and combining them with my own life source, I can heal the majority of Anaximandros' wounds and since the other sources have been destroyed, I have no means to heal myself, Bias explained. In other words, she using her own life force, it means that it's death for her, Suthies said. Why? She asked. Bias was surprised by the question. Why stay when you can run away? She asked. If that were me, I would have run away to preserve my own life and come back some other day. She said. Didn't I told you before? Bias asked. More than the task of retrieving the hero's relics, Anaximandros comes first. To realize his desires and to satisfy him, I will do whatever it is to make him happy. Bias said. That is my everything, he is my whole world and I will do whatever it takes to make him happy and to protect him, Bias said. So, she said. That is your, she said as she is beginning to feel sympathy towards her enemy. Yes, Bias said, that's is my love towards this person, she stated without hesitation. Hey, Bias, Anaximandros said. Catch her now. I want her now. He demanded. This made her blood boil. Enemy or not, this disgusting man doesn't have any right to hurt Bias like this. Why do it for such a jerk? She asked. Bias smirked a little. I see that you have no idea about this impulsive and uncontrollable feelings, a desire to make the holder of your heart happy at all cost, Bias said. She stared at her, at the ready. Then, why don't I help you understand this uncontrollable and impulsive feelings, Bias said. You see, I have been noticing this man on the chapel near the foot of the mountain, Bias said. And those words is enough to send cold and merciless fear down her whole being. I knew it, Bias said. Well, Anaximandros asked impatiently. It seems like there is a bothersome insect that is preventing you from taking the archbishop for yourself. How about we destroy it, and maybe the archbishop would be too deep in despair for her to care whether or not you are fucking her, Bias said. Where to? Anaximandros asked eagerly. On the chapel, Bias said before they both flew towards the chapel where the tool is. Easy, she thought in fear at the thought of Shay being in danger. Wait, she shouted after the two as she chased after them. Do try to keep up, Bias says smugly. She can feel it, the strong desire to keep him safe, protect him from all the harms of the world rise up inside her heart. The feeling of Shay having a strong hold of her heart, making her do every possible things she never thought she would do, a feeling strong enough to make her jump into action without second thought. This is, she thought as Shay's smiling face came to mind, further fueling her desire to see him. This is the uncontrollable emotion she spoke of, she thought as she held her hand over her heart as she chased after the two. Chapter 43, The End of the Right To. Meanwhile, somewhere in the rubbles, a single pebble have fallen down into the hole and landing rather heavily on a woman's forehead, effectively waking her up from her slumber. Oh, Valerie muttered as she woke up from her short nap. And Merlin would have called me a stubborn old mule, she said. Because I'm too stubborn to die, Valerie muttered. But in all seriousness, she really thought is about to die, and if it wasn't for her quick thinking and planted a clone of herself, then she would have been burned to crisp by now. Well, I don't intend to die like this anyway, she muttered as she opened the line to call out for Ignatz and Raphael. Raphael? Ignatz. Valerie called out. Hey, can you two hear me? She asked. There is still no answer on the other line. Hey, do you hear me? Valerie asked, but was met with silence. What is going on? Valerie thought. Why aren't they answering me? She thought before she checked if her communication magic is still activated. Raphael? Ignatz. Valerie called out. I wasn't fighting anymore, it's okay to talk now, she said. Can you two hear me? Valerie asked as she is starting to feel nervous when she didn't hear any reply from the opposite side. What is going on? Valerie asked before a horrifying thought crossed her mind. What if the metamorphic slaughterer found them? She thought as cold fear gripped her heart. But no. Valerie thought, there is no way that Heracles can find them since I've imbued them with a cloaking magic. Valerie thought. Raphael. She shouted this time. Ignatz. Valerie called out. No. No. She shouted. See? You failed to protect someone again. But, Valerie said, and you have no one to blame other than yourself. You could have fought and repelled that vile man out of Okama Mountain, but no, you turn your back and pretend that none of this is your business. Because it isn't my business. She screamed to the voice inside her head. You say that it isn't your business, but in reality you are making excuses. You are just being a coward. What do you want me to do? Valerie shouted. Fight again. Shed blood once more. She said. Was it wrong for me to just enjoy this peaceful moment in time? Was it wrong for me to finally find something for me to be happy with? Valerie exclaimed. After 3 millennia of fighting, killing, and seeing death, was it too much to ask for peace in my life? She asked. It isn't, but it is too much for a coward like you. You are just running away because you lost what you have lived for such a long time. She kept quiet at that. For such a long time, vengeance have been the reason why she keeps on pushing on living for so long, and now you found something to live for once more, and this time, it wasn't the anger, the hatred you have felt for so long, not something for you to kill but something for you to protect, to cherish, and you threw that all away because you are a coward. I have something to live for, Valerie said. I have something to protect, and I threw all that away, she said weakly as tears rolled down her eyes. I took both of them for granted and now, Valerie said, I'm alone again, she said. So, what do you want to do, Valerie Helena Regnus? Nothing but to avenge them, she said weakly. Then, let your wings soar once more. She scoffed at herself as she is slowly being enveloped by a bright golden light. Funny, she thought as the light slowly turned into an armor. It felt empty, she said as an armored wings sprouted from her back before golden light enveloped her. But I'll make him pay. He killed my beloved henchman, after all, Valerie said as she soared to the sky. As soon as she is on the surface, Valerie too squeaks behind her, making her look behind her. Ignatz. Raphael. Valerie said as soon as she saw the two laying on the ground with several digging materials laying around them. They are fine, they are all right, they are alive. And that thought is enough for her tears to flow rapidly from her eyes as relief and gladness washed over her heart. Why am I crying? She thought. Even though I felt relief, why am I crying? She thought. Miss Valerie, Raphael called out, are you okay? He asked. We have come to dig you out, but, Ignatz said as he admired her golden armor and the helmet covering her head while her long brown hair flutters in the wind. Are you hurt, Miss Valerie? Raphael asked. No, she said as she turned her back on them to hide her tears. Just angry that Heracles managed to beat me, that's all, Valerie said. Then, Ignatz said, go beat him up, big sister, he said. We'll go back to Ethra and support you from there, he said. Yeah, Raphael said. Right, Valerie said. Then, we'll be off, big sister, Ignatz said. Let's go, Ignatz, Raphael said. Ignatz nods and they are off. Have you finally found your courage? I have someone to protect, Valerie muttered with a soft smile on her face. He can feel it. Byleth is coming, he thought before he felt himself starting to shake in fear. Stop shaking right now, he thought as the man before him let out an even oppressive aura. I have to hold on until Byleth arrive, he thought. The man noticed the slight shaking of his legs. Damn. You. The man shouted angrily, you dare deceive me? The man exclaimed angrily. Shay. Arvel shouted urgently, snapping him out of his mind. I know, he said. I was hoping to avoid fighting him until Byleth arrived here, but, he said as he draws his sword, there is no way around it, he said. Oh. The man said in amusement, you are going to fight me? He asked in amusement. Me, the metamorphic slaughterer, Heracles. Heracles exclaimed. I will. He said as he pointed his sword towards Heracles before summoning the other sword on his other hand. Heracles' purple eyes looks at the sword closely and curiously before he jumped into action, hands transformed into a giant claw. He managed to roll out of the way as the giant claw lodged itself into the ground. He saw this as an opportunity to release the purple-colored light beam/air blades towards Heracles. Did I hit him? He muttered as the screen of dust surrounded the area where Heracles is. Look out! Arvel screamed instinctively before Heracles emerged from the dust, hands transformed into claws of the wolf. He barely dodged the attack, hitting him on his abdomen, tearing at the metal plating of his armor as though the armor is no more than a hot knife on a butter, splattering blood as the wounds opened before he cast a dark spike and hurled it towards Heracles. Heracles smirks before he suddenly disappeared before the spell hit him in a way that is suspiciously like his. Nice try, boy, Heracles said as he appeared behind him, hands infused with magic and at the ready to punch his back open. Just as Heracles' fist is about to hit his chest, he saw the very fabric of space shifting, letting him evade Heracles' attack before he readied himself to attack as he saw Heracles' back before the fabric of space shifted again as he comes closer to Heracles' back, sword already halfway on his back. Heracles moves a little, making him cut his arm off instead, splattering blood all over the place, but despite his arm being cut off, Heracles' smirk grows ever wider. He felt a huge amount of power releasing from the arm between them as it falls down before it glowed brightly and exploding, shooting various spikes all over the place. He barely escaped from the flurry of spikes as he used Shadow Flash to avoid it. "This is," he muttered as he is growing weaker and weaker as blood keeps on seeping out of the 3 deep wounds on his stomach. "Arvel, how?" he asked. "Damn it, Arvel," said, "I usually tease you about being the unluckiest fellow I've ever met, but this is too dire to even tease you about such a thing," Arvel said. "What are you not telling me, Arvel?" he asked before he felt someone behind him. "Didn't anyone told you not to be distracted, boy?" Heracles said before he felt a pain on his back as Heracles planted another wound on him. At this rate, he thought as Heracles transformed into a giant panther, "I won't last long," he thought as he dodged Heracles after he pounced on him before Heracles landed and transformed into a dragon. "How the hell did he do that?" he thought as Heracles opened his mouth and fired a fireball towards him in the size of a small house. He saw the very fabric of space shifting and he is once again a little further from Heracles and his attack before he saw the space shifted back towards Heracles. He readied his blades as space shifted on his will before he was on Heracles' head. He is about to jam his 2 swords on his skull when Heracles once again shifts shape and falls on the ground. "Another one!" he exclaimed. "Over here!" Heracles shouted as he sprouted from the ground, hitting him on the stomach before he was thrown a few meters away from Heracles. He is still recoiling in pain as Heracles seems to shadow flash in front of him in the form of some sort of hellhound. He put out his sword arm before the beast gnawed at his arm, splattering blood everywhere as Heracles' fangs cut through his armor as though it was made of paper. "Get off me, old bastard!" he said before kicking him off him with enough of his enhanced strength, a courtesy of Arvel's power. Heracles tore a huge chunk of his flesh as he managed to get him off him before he dashed off to wrestle the man, grabbing his jaw and opening them widely. He throws him to the ground and prepared to rip him in half before Heracles shift form again and he escaped his grasp. Heracles appeared in front of him so suddenly, hands transformed into a blade before he swung it towards his neck, to decapitate him. Just as the blade was about to touch his neck, he shadow flashed just in time to dodge the attack before he appeared behind him in his awakened form. Heracles was taken aback as he appeared before him in that form. "That form, wait, Heracles said with a wide smile, "you can use Shadow Flash just like me and the other 2, and that sword is," he said. A grin slowly appeared on his face. He can feel a cold shiver run down his spine as soon as he saw the grin on his face. "That form, that power," Heracles said with a laugh. "I finally found you," he said as he maniacally laughed. "Epimens," he exclaimed as he transformed into a beast with the body of a man, feet of a bird, head of a lion, and horns on top of his head. "Damnit, damnit, damnit, damnit!" Arvel said in panic as Heracles' shadow flashed again. He looks around to feel the atmosphere around him, hoping to pinpoint the next moment Heracles will appear. "Behind you, Shay!" Arvel shouted. "Wadash!" he said before he felt Heracles stab him on his back. "Nothing personal, boy," Heracles said as he buried his blade hand on his back. "It's just business," he said with a chuckle. "Byleth," he thought as he can feel the pain on his back intensified. "I'm sorry, I'm going to die here," he thought, as he is preparing for his impending doom. "Yes again, bastard," Valerie said as she kicked Heracles back with the force of 1,000 warriors. He recoiled in pain as he tried to reach his back. His vision is starting to fade as blood continued to seep out of him from his wounds. "Shay! Shay!" Arvel shouted, snapping him out of himself. "I'm fine, just the adrenaline fading away," he said as he tried to steady himself on his feet. "You are alive," he said turning to Valerie, clad in a golden armor, A little bit of reminiscent of Saint Cyro's armor, but this is more armored than Saint Cyro's, and a helmet covering her head with her brown hair fluttering in the winds. Did you recover, Miss Valerie? He asked as Valerie picked him up effortlessly. Miss Valerie? He asked as Valerie readied herself to throw him. What are you doing, Ig? He asked as she threw him towards the direction where Heracles came flying to. Heracles bounced back from the rubbles of where Valerie threw him and fired several fireballs on. Damn, he thought, I let myself be distracted by Epamin's core being in front of me. Rookie mistake, he thought before he managed to caught glimpse of Epamin's vessel flying in breakneck speed towards him, catching him off guard before everything around him exploded. He was surprised to see Valerie next to him despite just throwing him out of her reach. He looked to the direction of Heracles and saw him surrounded by swords made of fire with arrows made of fire hovering over him, while a magic circle bearing the crest of Agartha seems to glue him to place. And then, we go kaboom! Valerie said as she snapped her finger, detonating the swords and letting the arrows loose. Heracles was thrown to the air by the force of the explosion. Here! Valerie said as she aimed her halberd towards Heracles, while several identical halberds appeared around her in an arch. Have some halberd on me, she said as she threw the one on her hand before the other halberd follows the first one, exploding as soon as they hit their target, throwing Heracles off the ground into the earth below him. Oh, wow! Valerie said happily as she put her hands on her waist. Seems like vengeance isn't the only motivator to fight, she said happily. That's dangerous. He screamed. Valerie turned to him. What? She asked, carefree of anything. I just used you as a way to surprise him, she said as she shakes her finger at him. Wadesh, he said. He exclaimed as the mourner of Atlanta hummed a happy tune to herself. Now is not the time to scold you. The tool, he said, pointing towards the direction of the tool. I see, Valerie said as her halberd materialized on her hand again. Then, I'll go take care of that stubborn old bastard while you wait here and have that midget, Byleth, take of that for you, Valerie said. Then, let me dash, he said as he flinched when he felt his wounds throbbing. You've already done enough, Valerie said. Go take a rest and look after your wound, or you will risk the Archbishop's wrath upon you, she said. But he is already dash, he said as he felt Heracles' signature renewed itself. But how? He exclaimed in fear. If he can be killed that easily, then no one have to suffer, Valerie said before her wings appeared. Go tell the young lady about the compasses, Valerie said as she soared, and good luck, she said as she dove after Heracles. He felt a familiar warmth closing in on his location. Here she comes, he thought as he saw the familiar white flames from the distance and point his finger up to the tower above. Chapter 44, The End of the Rite 3. As she flew beside Bias and Anaximandros, the chapel of Saint Indec came to her sight. Magnificent and strong-looking chapel with the symbol of Saint Indec's mark on every tower of the chapel. Below the chapel, she saw a familiar purple-haired knight staying his ground as he seems to be pointing something above him. She thought as she comes closer and closer, close enough for her to see him covered in blood and severely wounded. No. You should have retreated as soon as you gained those wounds, Shay, you idiot, she thought as she gritted her teeth, trying to contain the worry inside her heart. Above, she thought as she took a peek at where he is pointing at. That's the tool, she thought. You're really here with me, she thought as happiness replaced the worry and fear inside her heart. Suthies, I'll fight with my own way, she said towards Suthies. Suthies hummed in approval. Just be careful, Suthies said. She nods and started to descend and avert her direction from the two slitherers. All right, Bias said. Why don't we go there and say hi to him? Bias said. Anaximandros nods before he fired a dark spike towards Shay. Damn it! She cursed under her breath as she swung her sword to at least destroy the spikes, but on her frustration, she can only intercept one and the rest come hurling down on Shay. She shouted at him, trying to tell him to put up a barrier. Shay seems to know what she is saying as the spikes hit him and the ring seems to repel them. He opened his eyes as the dust dissipated. Shay, she said as she holds out her hand towards him. As soon as she near enough to him, come with me, she said before she grab hold of her outstretched hand and she come hurling up towards the tool. That's their tool? She asked as she landed as carefully as possible as to not hurt Shay further than he already is. Yeah, Shay said as he started to breath heavily. Twerp. Suthies called out. I'm still here, Shay said, and I have your back, your grace, he said. I'll end this quickly, she said as she felt her heart beating rapidly. Just don't die on me, all right? She pleaded, looking at him and internally trying to repress the fear and panic that is growing in her heart. Consider it done, Shay said before he took a deep breath. Your grace, he said. So, you and I are not that different from one another, Bias said. How so? She asked as she raised her blade at the ready. Despite your big talk about your duties and how you are the guardian of Fodlan, Bias said, you still went after your knight first instead of destroying Compassus, despite it being the best time to destroy our tool and defeat us once and for all. I guess I'm wrong about you, descendant of the beast, Bias said with a smirk. She looked at Shay. No, I know this is over the moment he found the tool for me, she said. The tool is of no importance now that the traps and host you have spread across the mountain have been destroyed, which meant that the tool is just here to maintain Labyrinth at your behest, she said. That's why I choose him, she said. I see, Bias said. It is true that I attacked him is because I was hoping to sway you and create an opening for us, but, Bias said, it seems like you are underestimating our Compassus, Bias said. It is a handy device, Anaximandros said. It can perform quite a lot of spells if you nudge within the right direction, harlot, he said. What the hell did you call her? Shay exclaimed angrily. She touched his arm to calm him down. Bias touched Anaximandros' cheek. Yes, indeed, Anaximandros, Bias said. When I input a spell within the tool, then it will always point to a specific direction, she said as the compass arrow rapidly spun inside, over and over again until it fulfilled its purpose, Bias said as the arrow pointed towards Anaximandros. The direction, Shay said, changed, he said. Probably the final spell that will protect Anaximandros after Bias' death, she thought. Hey, when will I be able to defile her, Bias? Anaximandros asked. And I want to do so in front of this bastard, he said as Shay pushed her behind him protectively. It's okay, Shay, she said as she put her hand on his back. She winced as she saw the 3 claw marks and a gaping hole on his back. I won't let him, she said, because it solely belongs to you, she added in her mind. Your grace, Shay said. Trust me, all right, she said. I always do, Shay said as he relaxes and let her out of the protective barrier of his back. Be careful, he said. She nods. I envy you, Archbishop, Bias said. And I pity you, she said. You are such a fool, she said as she looked at Bias. Why thank you, your grace, Bias said, but I don't expect a compliment from anyone else aside from Anaximandros, Bias said. Simple as that, she said. Now, let's get you that woman, Bias said. Finally, Anaximandros said eagerly. Valerie looked down on the cliff as she saw something gigantic move around its dark crevices and grinned to herself before a giant snake emerged from it, prepared to take a nip at her. She swiftly dodged it as she dove downward and got behind Heracles. Don't be shy now, Valerie said as she gripped the serpent's body hard. And come out so I can beat you, she exclaimed as she squeezed hard enough to extract Heracles out of the serpent's mouth. Whoa! Heracles shouted before he managed to steady himself and backflip to head towards before swinging his gigantic claws at Valerie. As soon as his claws hit Valerie, she multiplied into several copies of herself, surrounding Heracles in a circle. Say, old bastard, Valerie said, have you ever played Ring Around the Rosies? She asked. Heracles looked around, trying to find a way to get out of her trap. No. Valerie said with a huge grin, then, let me teach you. Valerie said as her copies pointed their fingers at Heracles, and guess what, she said as fire started to form on each of the copies' fingers. You are it. Valerie said as the fireballs fired from their fingers and shot towards Heracles. Damn it, Heracles thought as he shielded himself from the explosion. Even if I died earlier, it is no excuse for me to be this weak. He thought as he dodged another dive attack from Valerie, and the Archbishop must be quite strong for Bias and Anaximandros to have a hard time bringing her down and retrieving the hero's relics. Heracles thought, just which Nabatean are they fighting? The Hammer of Justice? The Benevolent? The Immaculate One? Which one is Dash? Heracles thought as he looked back and saw the pure white flames on top of the tower. White flames, the fell star in her vessel. Heracles exclaimed in shocked. That's right. Valerie said as she slammed her fist against Heracles' skull, making him crash-landed on the earth below. The fell star have her hands on Epaminondas and his vessel. No, I can't get involved too deeply with them, lest they managed to know our plan with Epaminondas' core, he thought as he transformed into a huge mole. I have to retreat. Heracles thought as he digs deep and buried himself underground and escaped. Bias and Anaximandros is already done for anyway, he thought. The metamorphic slaughterer is retreating. Valerie muttered in confusion as Heracles' presence disappeared. Anaximandros charges towards her, which she merely sidestepped before jamming her knees on his stomach, making the man recoil in pain before he attempted another jab at her. She quickly punched him hard enough to throw him a few meters away from her, recoiling a few moments before recovering. Bias is probably supplying him of what limited power she have left, and the bastard is not even considerate enough to finish this quickly, she thought grimly as she channeled her power and led a stream of flames towards the man who is dashing towards her. The flames seems to be only affecting Bias at this point, while leaving Anaximandros unscathed. Just as I thought, that is the last spell by Bias to protect Anaximandros, she thought as Anaximandros jumped up and jabbed at her. Shay intercepted the attack, activating the lance's power and planting another wounds on Shay before she followed up by a swing of her sword, cutting Anaximandros in half. I'm sorry, she muttered to Bias as Anaximandros' upper torso slid off his lower half. Bitch, whore, Anaximandros said as he lay dying. Shut up, Shay said as he jammed his foot on Anaximandros' head, crushing it under his solace. That's for harming her and calling her such vile things, he muttered as he picked up Anaximandros' lance before turning to her. Are you woe? Shay said. Blood, he said. Oh, she said as she looked over herself. I think mine closed up, but, she said as she went over to him. Yours haven't, she said softly as she cast a heal over his wounds. Shay sighed in relief. That felt good, Your Grace, he said with a smile. But it will leave a scar, she said as she felt a wave of relief washed over her as she slowly closed his wounds. Then, I will wear these scars proudly, Shay said as he leaned his forehead on hers as she healed him to the best of her capabilities. And why is that? She asked as Suthies activated the flame of purification to cleanse her of her scars and remaining wounds as well as to clean her up. I gained them in service to you, Shay said softly. You know, a mark of loyalty to you and proof that I will be more than willing to do what I must for you, he said with a proud smile. She smiled at him and grabbed his cheeks, softly and lovingly caressing them with her thumb. Shay responded by taking one of her hand into his before he nuzzled his cheek into her palm, kissing it before he nuzzled into it. The gesture seems to cast a spell on her and she suddenly felt a little bold. She slowly pulled him down towards her, wrapping her arms around his neck as Shay slowly lowered himself to her, closing her eyes as she felt his lips getting closer to hers. As much I hate interrupting something between lovers, but we still have work to do, Valerie said as she landed behind her. She groaned in frustration at the interruption. She is so close. Wait, why is she angry at the interruption? What work? She asked, trying not to growl angrily at Valerie. We still need to fix things here in Labyrinth, Valerie said, looking unapologetic at her interruption. This caught her attention and she instantly gave Valerie her attention. And why is that? She asked. As long as I'm concerned, this is just another distortion spell, and any damages caused by the battle will be fixed as soon as the spell disappeared, she said. Well, Your Grace, Valerie said as she reverted back to her normal form. Labyrinth is a special spell developed by those sickos from New Agartha, she said. This spell's main purpose is to create so much destruction after the caster have died, and at this point, Labyrinth is a giant time bomb, Valerie said. Then, we better find a way to undo the damages, she said. Relax your pretty little head, midget, Valerie said. I already input my spell inside. The remaining host's bias have been planting all over the city, she said. All you have to do is help me cast it, and that is that, Valerie said. She nods in agreement. Teach me the spell then, she said. It's a simple one, Valerie said as she started teaching her the spell. Ready? Valerie asked as she raised her finger. Ready, she said as she mimicked Valerie. And the spell started to flow around Okama Mountain, gradually fixing the damages that was caused by the battle. So, mind telling me how the twerp got wounded that much, Epimans? Suthies asked. He was battling the metamorphic slaughterer, Arvel said. Did you just say, Suthies said. And it seems like they are looking for me too, Arvel said. And they finally found me, Arvel. Then, our situation grows dire, huh? Suthies said. Did you at least manage to kill him? She asked. Do you really need to ask me that, Suthies? Arvel asked. Then, we better think of a way to prevent them from getting their hands on you, Suthies said. Didn't know you care so much for me, Suthies, Arvel said with a chuckle. I'm touched, he said as the pocket watch hanging on Shay's waist started bouncing in delight. Hush. I care more about what they are going to do when they got their hands on your core. And what would happen to the twerp if you ever got taken from him. If he died, then my vessel will fall into despair, Suthies stated. Who and why are we supposed to be vigilant about, Suthies, Arvel? She asked as soon as they are done fixing the towns below. We'll explain later, Suthies said. We can always talk about it later, midget, Valerie said. I assume that you are staying in town, little Helen, Suthies said. Yup, Valerie said. I might damn as well, since this place never gets boring, and who knows what kind of trouble you four will get into once I turn my eyes away from here, she said as she stretched her arms up. I guess everything is fine and dandy now, Valerie said. Once the spell disappeared, then the flow of time will continue once more, she said. She nods before. Ah! She shouted as she realized something that instant. Your Grace, Shay asked in surprise and worry. Did something hurt? He asked in panic as he suddenly got on his feet. No, she said. It's just, oh no, she said panicking. We have to go back to the monastery now, she said urgently. Why yeah, Shay said, but there is no hurry since the rite will be starting in another hour or two, he said. But if you are panicking like this, then I can assume there is some consequences if we are not in places we are supposed to be before the spell was cast, Shay said. You hit the nail on this one, twerp, Suthies said. It might cause cognitive dissonance on the bystanders if you two are not back to where you two were before the spell was cast, she said. Now that I think about it, Shay thought forlornly. I was talking with Eddie, he thought with a tired sigh. Maybe it's better that I don't went back there yet, he thought. At any rate, we better go back now, she said. Why are in such a hurry, Your Grace? Shay asked. Why? She said as she frantically looked around. Dress, my dress, she said as she covered her chest with her arms. What am I going to do with it? She asked as she finally managed to be aware that she is still pretty much slightly exposed to Shay. All right. Manuela can fix it, or Mercedes, she said. Manuela and Mercedes is frozen just like the others, Your Grace, Shay said as he walks over to her. Calm down, he said as he put a hand on her shoulder. Are you doing something before the fight? Shay asked. She looked at him and she can instantly feel her face heating up. What is she going to tell him? She is in the middle of a fight with another woman for his heart. No. Anything but that. It's none of your business. She said. She is lying a little since it have everything to do with him and he have every right to be involved with it, at least consciously. All right, Shay said. Just go raid your closet for a new set of clothes similar to what you are wearing now, Suthies said. A little change in outfit shouldn't harm anyone's cognitive function, right? She said with a sigh. Well, nothing can be done with it since her Grace's dress is broken beyond repair. I hope we can explain this to Seath later, Shay said. We will worry about Seath, let's just go back now. She said. I'm going to fly now, she said. So, hold me tightly, I mean hold my hand, she said as she held out her hand towards him. Of course, Shay said with a sigh. Have a problem with that? She asked as Shay took her hand. Then, see you later, Miss Valerie, she said as her wings flapped, taking them up to the air. Gah! Shay shouted in surprise. Thank you, Miss Valerie, he said, and with that they are gone, leaving the mourner of Atlanta astonished to what she just witnessed. Thank you and see you later, Valerie muttered before a soft and happy smile appeared on her face. Those words are words she never even grows accustomed with, but it's not bad to hear them at all, Valerie muttered. Chapter 45, The End of the Rite 4. Everyone is really frozen, he said as he follows Byleth through the monastery hall leading to her room on the 3rd floor. It will only last a while before everything went back to normal, Byleth said as they arrived to her room. Enough time for us to change into cleaner outfits, she said, eyeing his broken armor before eyeing her broken dress. Yeah, he said, your dress is easier to explain, but mine, well, how do I explain about the armor since it's not like it is easy to break an armor this much, he said, pointing to his armor. I'll leave that up to you, Sir Knight, Byleth said with a giggle. As usual, he said with a smile. Well, I better get going now and change my outfit before the spell disappear, he said as he put Gibalg on his shoulder. You should, or everyone might freak out if they saw one of my strongest knights in such a state, and what more, my bodyguard is absolutely bloodied, Byleth said. Arvel, don't you have something like what Suthies is using to clean and heal her grace? He asked to the pocket watch on his waist. Unfortunately no. Arvel said. Once again, Nabatean, 4555. Agarthance 0, Suthies said. You were keeping scores? Byleth asked. Shut your trap, overgrown lizard, Arvel said. Well, he said as bow. I better get going, your grace, he said. Wait, Shay, Byleth said. Yes, your grace, he asked as he turned to face her once more. I, Byleth said as she looked to the side. You mention a reward before the fight, right? She said. Oh, he said, scratching his head. Forget about that, he said. And why is that? Byleth asked. He walks back to her and held her cheek in his hand. I failed to protect you, he said as he looked down and saw the rip on her dress. I should have come sooner, but he said. You've done more than enough, Byleth said as she held his hand. If it weren't for you, then I would have been taken against my will by Anaximandros and killed, she said. He instinctively pulled her in his arms at the thought of that sick bastard violating Byleth and killing her. The very thought made him tighten his arms around her protectively by instinct. But I wasn't, and that's thanks to you, Byleth said as she wrapped her arms around him. You transferred a lot of your powers in me, and then you helped Miss Valerie to find and destroy those hosts, disabling the traps and the main purpose of their spell, she said. Is that not enough for you to feel proud of? Byleth asked. No, he said. Not when you got hurt, he said as he tightened his arms around her while he buried his face in her hair. The comforting scent of lilies invaded his senses and he can feel himself calming down. Byleth gently grabbed his cheek and separated from him, enough that they are looking in each other's eyes. I'm fine, you are there and I'm fine, she stated. Thank you for always being with me, Shay, Byleth said as she pulled him closer and bumped their foreheads together. Those words seemed to work as she intended them to be. He gave her a smile as he basked in the warmth of her presence, relishing in the comfort only she can offer him. I'll always will, he said as he opened his eyes to meet with hers. Byleth, he said softly, forgetting the barrier between them just for a moment, forgetting that she is his master and he is but a lowly servant to her. Byleth's eyes softened almost adoringly and lovingly before she went forward and planted a kiss on his forehead before nuzzling closer to him, lips almost touching with hers. I'm happy, Shay, she muttered softly while giving him the smile he loves so much. And that was more than he can ever hope for as a reward. After he finished changing into a cleaner clothes, he made his way towards the fishing pond and sat down next to Edwin, just in time as the spell have disappeared. But love and like, Edwin said as he looked up the sky. Nobody knows the definition of love and like, he said. They both seem the same to me while I know one is the deeper feeling of the same word, Edwin said, but I guess love is something you will never expect to come, it just come creeping up on you until it's too late to notice or to prevent it to happen, he said. It just come creeping on you before you know it, Edwin said. He looked up the sky and contemplated. Life as a mercenary made him quite disconnected to bonds, more so with the trauma of his childhood, when he was kicked out of the village he once called his home when his stepmother died. Go away, child of misfortune. You are not welcome here. Those words etched in his mind like a tattoo and he have lived by it since then. They are right, he is only a child of misfortune, no one would have wanted to stay with him, not even his biological parents wanted him. Everyone will just leave him and that's why he developed a habit of leaving before he got too attached to someone or some place. That's why he treated every woman that showed an interest in him as nothing more than a one-night stand during his days as a mercenary, and that's why he refused to be one of Byleth's knights when she offered him that time, and the reason why he refused to believe he have feelings that went above and beyond the feeling of duty towards her. He can't imagine life without her now, not when Byleth have become a constant in these short few months they have been together. For such a short time, Byleth have become his whole world, how unbecoming of him. But knowing that he have someone to call home, is not a bad thing, he felt relief to know that he wasn't too far gone. At which point in time does he know that his feelings of like become that of love? What defined love? He doesn't know and maybe he'll never will. You'll also what? Sophia shouted at her. I'll also, she said as she felt her heart racing. More than fighting some monster or facing a whole army, this is 1,000 times more frightening than all of those combined, and she found herself tongue-tied and scarce for words on what she should say. Don't get her wrong, she already know what she is going to say, but it's the matter of how to get it out of her mouth. Don't confess to him. Don't take him away from me, she exclaimed. What am I saying all of a sudden? She thought as Shay's face appeared in her mind. Just what am I saying? She thought as she felt cold fear grip her heart at the thought of him leaving her. That isn't something I want to say even if I thought of it once. Why am I saying it out of all the things? She thought. No. Sophia said calmly, I'll tell him. I'll tell Sir Shay how I feel and I won't let you get in my way. Crafty Ms. Eisner, she said. I'm not crafty. Don't do it because I said so. She exclaimed. Usually, she wouldn't even think about using her authority as Archbishop even in a dire situation, but for some reason, she is more than willing to throw that around. Shay is my, he is my, she said. Shay is my, she thought as Shay's smiling face appeared in her mind, the feel of his arms around her, his comforting scent, and his warmth, the warmth that made her feel safe no matter what. She thought, realizing that she did have feelings that went above and beyond of that feeling towards a friend. She started as she clenched her fist. I don't know much about this feelings, but, she said, but me and Shay went through a lot together. In such a short time, my whole world revolved around him and he have become a constant in my life that I found myself loathing the thought of him leaving me, and lately, she said, I have been so happy, being by his side brought me indescribable happiness, and, she said before swallowing a lump in her throat. I can make him happy. She declared. I'll make him happy. So, he is better off being with me. She said. How can you say that? Sophia exclaimed. It's Circe's decision on whom can make him happy. She said. No. He is better off being with me. You don't know him the way I do. She exclaimed. Then I'll get to know him. Sophia said. That's impossible. She screamed. How is it impossible? Sophia exclaimed. Because I say so. She said. Both of them glared at one another as they both heard the bell ringing, signaling the start of the goddess rite of rebirth. I won't lose to you, Sophia said, pointing her finger towards her. Who will ever lose to someone like you? She asked as she turned her back on Sophia. And with that the two women walked away from one another, hearts full of determination to gain the heart of their chosen. Suthies. She called out as they both watched the caskets get covered one by one as each hero's relics was laid to rest. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, Suthies said. I'm just glad that they have been laid to rest after millennia of being used as a weapon of destruction, Suthies said. Then, I hope this bring you peace, she said as the final coffin was closed. Suthies, she said. I hope they have found the peace they have been seeking for millennia, Suthies said. She nods her head. With this, the crest system will no longer have any use since the holy weapons that replaced them can be used by anyone, crested or crestless. The crest will only make the weapons stronger, but that is all that is. She hoped it's enough to abolish the crest system. Let's observe, Your Grace, Suthies said. Of course, she said. Check the description for the links to the author.